Hello, we're here with Midday, and I'm Denise.
And I'm Darlene.
And this is a good friend of mine, Janice Stridick, who has been helping me sort out some relationship issues that I had with my mom. She's very well known for her project, The Mother-Daughter Way, which is gaining momentum, and she's writing a book about mother-daughter relationships, and it's a timely issue this month, especially since it's Family Caregiving Month.
Yes, it
and Darlene just recently lost her mother.
And yours is coming up.
The anniversary of my mom's passing is November 15th, and today happens to be Janice's mother's birthday, Alice Wilson Stridick.
Alice Steer Wilson.
Alison Steer Wilson.
Yes.
And she would have been 91 years old today.
Yeah,
so
My mom was actually 98, and her sister is 100.
Yeah,
and
that's
she was
crazy.
actually at the funeral
Wow.
at 100 years old.
Yeah.
And she's perfectly okay at 100.
She's amazing.
She lost her voice.
Mm-hmm.
They said it'll come back, but she could do puzzles, and she could do anything, and she can write stories.
She was moving around very, very easily with
I know
her
when the
book.
priest said something about women work so hard, she went, "Yeah!" It was really cute. She
And
was
my
sitting
mom
up front.
was 96 when she passed, so we have
Wow, we
longevity.
have
in our
longevity.
family. All three of us have
Well, my
longevity.
mother absolutely expected to live into her 90s. So today, her 91st birthday, is a good day to celebrate the fact that her legacy continues with the book that I finally published of her
Yeah.
work, and
Alice,
also the healing
amazing.
of mother and daughter relationships, because that was something that my mother and I achieved after 20 years of conflict, and really we loved each other, but we just couldn't be in the same state, you know.
I know that feeling. And then I wound up with my mother in my house in a mother-in-law suite that I built. And we actually got along so much better than we had all those other years, which was amazing.
Well, and that's one of the things that's so cool as you get older and you start to take responsibility for your own inner work, and you don't blame everything on family members. So that's, you know, the Mother-Daughter Way is a 12-week process that I do with women on the inward journey. And it came out of my journey because, like you, at the end, I was caregiving for my mother, and I had given up on really focus on my own business and my own thing, and all I wanted to do was care for her like she was my child.
Right.
And a friend of mine, a woman, said to me, "Janice, you've got to get ready to lose your mother." And I'm like, "No, we're fighting this. You know, well, how do you get ready?"
Well,
to
I don't think our
lose your
viewers
mother?
understand that Janice's mom was sick. She was stricken with cancer, and Janice became her caretaker, which, you know, the role reversal.
Sure.
A lot of us experience that as our parents age. You know, some of us are in the sandwich generation, but you know, Janice was an amazing caretaker, and I think sometimes when you're at that position where you're facing that end of life thing, you look at things a little differently. Don't you think so?
Well, it's very profound.
Now, you knew that she was coming to the end.
I did, but we couldn't let go of each other, and I think that's part of what happens with mothers and daughters. Like when you just lost your mother at 98.
But she was never sick.
Right.
She fell.
So, but exactly.
It was shocking. She was like, at 98, she was
shock.
vacuuming, and she was cooking, and her sister being 100. There was absolutely nothing wrong with her. And I want to say, and I have to say this because maybe you will agree or not agree, but I think the laws have to change, because I realize that seniors have rights, but I was speaking with a friend of mine who was a doctor, and thousands of seniors needlessly die because they refuse to go to the hospital. Even if you have medical power of attorney. Like my mother, she fell. She would be alive had she gone to the hospital and had x-rays. And the more I talked to people about it, that if there was something that you could do ahead of time, because medical power of attorney, if they come, like say 911, you call 911 and an ambulance comes, they cannot, if your parent or your relative makes sense and they act normal, they cannot take them against their will. So for 10 days we battled. Please call the doctors were coming, you know. She was saying, "Oh, I'm fine, I'm fine, I'm fine." Well, here she had fractured ribs that had punctured
Fighting
part of
to
her
the
stomach.
end. Fighting to the end.
Whereas they said had she gone, they could have possibly, that happened after the fall, so for 10 days. But
Right.
I mean, I understand that people have rights, but if there was a way that we could get them to agree, you know, when they're younger, that if it's something that, just to get them to the hospital for an x-ray, but they're afraid that if you send them there, they're going to wind up staying there. And it was very sad.
Your mother sounds like a very strong person.
Right. Well, she went on her own terms. She didn't want to go to the hospital. She was only there for 10 hours.
I have to say, Darlene, my mother chose a path of treatment that I didn't expect her to take.
Really?
She was very, she had a lot of pride in her immune system. She was really into alternative care and whatever you could do. Yet when she was diagnosed with stage 4 breast cancer, she went for the full arm of chemotherapy, surgery, the whole bit. And I just met a woman who cured herself of breast cancer by using alternative therapy.
I know a person too.
And everybody in her family was, except for one brother who lives in California, was against it. She got no encouragement from anyone, including the medical community.
That's profound.
That's amazing.
And this woman came to me. She was a daughter of one of my mother's good friends, and it came to me from one of my mother's paintings. She contacted me. She said, I have this painting. And I said, wait a minute, I have that painting. And it turns out there's 2 of them.
Right.
But what I feel very strongly about is we need to have agency. And that's kind of what the mother-daughter way is really about. It's about women taking up space, talking for themselves. Like that whole Me Too thing with the Harvey Weinstein.
Right.
Oh my God. I mean, I went on Facebook and I posted my Me Too, and I had no emotion about it. And people were saying, oh, you know, you're so brave to post that. And I'm thinking, no, it doesn't feel brave anymore. I mean, I've had this ability to tell my story and to hear other stories and to contextualize it. And that's what's happening in the media right now with the Harvey Weinstein and the...
But why did it take one person to come out for everybody to come out?
Well, because it's been dismissed.
The first person?
Nobody listens.
Right.
And also, there's a lot of hiding.
Right.
Like, I know with my mother, when I was molested in 8th grade, I didn't tell her.
Of course not, because that
sure,
was
back
the
in
time.
that day.
I was afraid that it was my fault. And
Let's hold that thought,
okay,
because we got to take a short break. This is really interesting, and I'm sure a lot of viewers out there have their own Me Too stories, and we'll be right back with more Midday.
We're back with Midday, and we're having a really great conversation. But before we do, I wanted to reach out and say, Lisa, I hope you're feeling better.
We miss you today.
We miss you. It's not the same without our wonderful angel person. She's an angel.
Yes.
And she also speaks to angels, too.
All right.
So why didn't the angels tell her she was going to get sick? That's what I want to know, Lisa. But anyway, we miss you. And this is a great conversation. And bring up what we were talking about on the break, about how this Harvey Weinstein thing just came out and how
everything is always dismissed. So women aren't taken seriously when they are confrontational, and people are fearful of reprisal.
I think that's part of what puts mothers and daughters, pits them against each other. Mothers are trying to protect, or they have their own issues, and then daughters blame the mother or rebel. I can see it in my own history, and then when I finally faced it and worked through it, we became more like equals, and we helped each other. I helped her with her art, and she was a client of mine in my business.
That's wonderful.
It was a lot of fun, and you know, we could argue, but then we were arguing creatively. We were making things together. And then when she got cancer, she was diagnosed with stage 4 breast cancer. It was late.
That quickly.
And it wasn't that quick.
She hadn't been diagnosed.
She had been misdiagnosed. It was in the early 90s before they would just go right for a biopsy. And at the time, I had a marketing and PR firm, and I'd been writing brochures about early detection for breast cancer. So it drove me nuts that...
Yeah, that your own mother was confronted with the situation, then you couldn't do anything.
Well, I did everything. I mean, I dropped everything. I took care of her.
Well, I mean, you couldn't have prevented it.
Because you didn't talk about your bodies,
Right.
except for diets and
Sure.
making them better.
My mother used to always say, "You ain't seen nothing yet. Wait till you see." Like, because she was getting older, and I was like, "Mom, how do you do it?" She was so spry and physical and
Well, I
gardening.
remember
and
you
everything.
saying your mother, didn't she wear like spike
She
heels?
did.
Oh,
She
wow.
did her hair. She thought she was Donna Reed. She was doing housekeeping in high heels and a dress.
Wow.
With that shirtwaist dress.
And I
with
thought that was
little
only
poof.
for the commercials.
No, I'd be like, not always, but most of the time she
Right.
was always in stilettos.
Oh my
Yeah,
gosh.
Yeah.
That's amazing.
Yeah, and my mother was the opposite, like barefoot, paint under
She was
her
the Birkenstock
nails.
girl.
Yeah. She was the hippie.
She was the
Right,
Birkenstock girl. Your mom was amazing. Let me ask
She
you a
was
question. When women come to you to share their stories, it must be really it's such a process to finally open up, and you know,
Well,
some
it
people
is.
have such a hard time talking about those relationships and the hurts, the suppression, you know, from all those years. What do you do to help draw people out of that state of
Well, for one thing, I'm
denial?
I'm always in process. I'm a work in process. We all are. So
Well, you're also enlightened.
I talk openly. There's no past tense in that.
You are enlightened.
No, that's a roller coaster.
Right.
See, my mother lived in a state of denial. She would not say anything about anything, and I think a lot of people
Most
do
of
that.
us do. We
Yeah.
all have blinders. You know, we can see the world that we want to see, that we're ready for. And what actually started me on this thing about the mother-daughter way was I was promoting this book, talking about my mother and her art. I put on a wonderful exhibition. People really loved the work and they loved the stories, and they would say to me, "Oh, your mother was so lucky to have a daughter like you." And I'd be like, "Not really.
You don't know the real story.
We fought for 20 years. I mean, it was hell on wheels, you know. I remember
She
time.
was really a strong woman.
Well, my mother was a perfectionist. That's part of being an artist. Nothing's ever done.
That's kind of, my mother was kind of like that too. Her sister used to do all the gowns for Dinah Shore back in the day that used to come out.
Dinah
God.
Shore,
Yeah,
that's a
and my
blast from the
mother learned how to be a dress designer too. And she was so good at all this, but I have to tell you, we should all tell a funny story about our mothers, but I have to tell you one thing I had against my mother, and she was the greatest seamstress. I would go out, and I was a musician, and I would go when I was young.
She
I was
played the accordion.
18, well, then I
I've
was
said
playing
this a million
keyboards.
times.
But wait, I would go to put my clothes on to go to play in a casino or wherever, and I'd find this bow sewn across my dress because she was old-fashioned Catholic, right? Italian.
She wanted to cover your
She wanted to
cleavage.
cover it, and I would get so mad. I'd be going there trying to pull it off and ripping the thing off, and that was one of the things we still to this day laugh about that.
That's hysterical.
And they were beautiful too. I mean, today they probably look really nice because she was an artist. But it's funny that you say we hold things forever, and I still talked about that. You know.
Well, I love that you could laugh about it, but it's kind of
But
funny.
it wasn't
that she
funny
would-
at the time.
No, it's kind of funny that she would go in your closet and just sew the bow
Right,
on
she
there.
would.
But that's the whole secret. You can look back and reflect on things and say, that's funny now. Some
Right.
people never get past that grudge.
I never got past something to this day, but now I can laugh about it since my mother passed away a few days ago. I always blame my mother. I am the clumsiest person, even though I was a dancing teacher.
I
was a
can attest
musician.
to that.
I fall over everything. I break bones, and I always blame my mother because my cousin said she never let me crawl because she was afraid I would get dirty. And then I read that if you don't crawl, you don't have a good equilibrium because that's how you. So
Wow.
even it was so funny right
That's
before
interesting.
when she fell, I said, "See, maybe your mother didn't let you crawl either." And we were laughing about it, and here. She went to the grave still thinking that I thought that, but it was kind of like the big joke. And I still fall. I fell a couple of days ago on a bag of
I've
dog
seen
food.
it happen,
Yeah,
folks.
right, really.
It's
I am
bad.
the worst.
Well, I that's a unique story. I have never heard that one. We've heard a lot of stories, haven't we, Denise?
I've been in the circle of women on the retreat that Janice
I wanna
hosts
go to
at
that
her
retreat.
house.
It's really fun.
And it's really intense when people are, letting go of all these stories.
Well, that
That is
the retreat
amazing.
is a really, it's a few days and you get a little deeper. But what I find happens is when women speak about their mothers, first of all, they don't want to stop. They want to keep telling these stories. But also, a lot of truth comes out that you wouldn't say to your mother or in the family. You would say it to other women in the context of sharing stories about mother. And that opens it up. It doesn't feel so taboo. If you
feel really safe in your circles. I've never felt so safe talking about things that were so personal and so like deep and hurtful and painful. Like as I
feels,
did.
Wow. Do
That's
people
great.
bring their children with them?
No.
If anything, I mean, there is a certain desire on a lot of people's part. Like, I want to do it with my daughter. I want to do it with my sister. I say no. It's better to do it alone because this is an inward journey.
Right.
And to be honest, you can't feel like you're going to hurt someone's feelings.
Right.
Like when I was having some issues getting the book done of her work, I was getting really frustrated. And a friend of mine who's a fellow poet and therapist said she knew that I was seeing the therapist that used to be my mother's therapist.
Oh.
And my mother, everybody loved her. And my friend says, Janice, you need your own therapist.
Oh, right.
And it takes a friend to say something like that.
Right.
And as soon as the light bulb went off, I mean, when I'm in therapy talking about my family issues or my fears or whatever, we're both sort of protecting my mother.
Right.
And when I went to another therapist, I was amazed at the stuff that came out.
And we're going to have you hold that thought because I'm sure there's a lot more to that's the end of that statement. And we'll be right back with more Midday.
We're back with Midday, Darlene, Denise, and we're having the greatest conversation here, and I love it. Mothers, daughters, and isn't this National
Family
caregiving? That's wonderful.
Right. Which so many daughters end up being their mother's caretakers, and it's a wonderful reversal. Like when my mother was needing me like that, I don't have kids of my own, but I felt like she was my child, and I was very, very grateful for the opportunity.
You were devoted as well. I mean,
and she was very grateful. I mean, I know she was 74 when she died.
So
and
young.
she was really
that's
bright.
young.
She was painting to the end. So I got and we had projects. I mean, for the last 2 weeks of her life, I was showing slides of her work on the screen and going over what I was going to do with the book. And I mean, I had to borrow all these paintings.
They're beautiful.
And scan them.
It's just
But
beautiful.
you know what else is really interesting too? I mean, it's not only your mother that was a very creative woman, but your grandmother was a poet, and she was incredible. Her book of poetry is one of the most amazing.
Yeah.
Wow.
This is the View in Winter. She has an amazing poem that I love, and I would love to have more of her greeting cards, but the poem about the afterthought. The afterthought, when you're ready to pass on, and what requested when she dies, how she wanted the family to think of her as not being locked in a box and her spirit traveling. It was just beautiful.
It was a beautiful poem, and the funny thing is that my grandmother didn't let us see that poem. She kept it back from us so that we would find it after she died.
Wow.
Just like when I went in my mother's studio, and Darlene, now that your mother's gone, I predict that you're going to learn things about her that you would never have been able to know before. It's amazing.
That's
how we sort of have a contract, and that's what the mother-daughter way breaks, which is, we don't talk about that.
Mm-hmm.
And yet there's an urge, there's a longing to talk about everything. And we talk a lot. Like mothers and daughters talk a lot. But sometimes you talk around things that are important.
But you know what too? You could be a child, an only child, or you could have several siblings. But what I find interesting is everybody has their own story, and it's not always matching up, because my brothers and sister have completely different recollections of what was going to happen, what was happening in our lives. But And there are some times when it comes together and it's really strong and powerful, and then other times it's like, no, I don't remember it being like that. So.
And I love the validation when women talk among themselves openly about what affected them. Because really what it's about is taking responsibility for processing your life and being present.
Right.
And saying what you need to say when you need to say it, and hearing other people, hearing their truth and not trying to change them. You know, I was
that what you just said is really powerful about hearing their truth.
Right.
Because everybody has their own truth.
Right. And it feels so good to be heard. And that's one of the messages I get from the women who do the work with me is they love that feeling of being heard. And then they discover things that their blinders didn't let them see. Like one woman found a drawer full of cards that her mother had sent her in her home when she was clearing out her mother's home after she died.
So she had saved them.
She'd saved them, but her mother had no, I think it was, well, I don't know whether Robin saved them or her mother, but when she was clearing things out, she started reading these cards in the context of having done some of this work.
Wow.
And she realized how much love there was there that she hadn't seen because she was too angry. Right. And there's like this wall.
Wow.
And we all have that.
amazing.
Yeah, it was beautiful.
I think we all have our anger issues with our mothers. No matter how good they are as people, you know, there's things like I grew up in that Brady Bunch era, and I was always wishing that my home was like the Brady Bunch because my dad died, and her previous husband, she had divorced, and then she married my stepfather. So there was all these dynamics that were kind of conflicting, and I always was wishing for it to be different. I spent my whole life wishing for things that could never be, and it's such a waste of time. And I think a lot of people do that.
Yeah. It's funny. And the other thing is that people look at your mother and how kind she is when your friends are over and everything, and they're like, oh, I wish I had a mother like yours.
Right.
I'm like, wait a minute, there's another side to this woman.
Right. Yeah. It's so funny. And how everyone I talked to at the funeral, the relatives, they all were, she's so kind, she was the parties, because she always did.
She was gorgeous.
As she got older, she was a little more reclusive. But I did learn one thing. She had written to my aunt, not the one who's 100, one who's around 90.
Oh, young
who was another character.
Right. At her funeral, she said, at my funeral, I want my daughter to play the piano. And I'm like, what are you, crazy? I'm not going to play the piano. They forced me to play the old Italian songs at the view, and there was a piano there, and it was so funny. This is not funny, but all the older aunts were crying, you know, because of the music. But when I was a little child, they would always tell me to play, and I didn't want to play because I thought they didn't like it because I play the old Italian songs and they'd all start crying. But they were crying because it was beautiful and they liked it. So I almost felt like that the other night. But my friend who has been to 1 million funerals and viewings, and you know, Amy, she sent me a card and she said, I have never been to a viewing that was more love and happy. Everybody was happy.
When I walked in there, I said, Darlene, this sounds like a party in here.
Well,
and then her mother she got her mother a pink casket.
Because she wanted pink, right? But my mother said to my aunt, and this is what I didn't know until we got together, is that she didn't want everybody to be really sad. She hated when they go because she said, I'm in heaven and I want music and I want my daughter to play them. And she even picked the song, and I didn't know this till I got there that night. And she had called and asked them to put a piano in there, and no one told me. So this is my aunt.
We're going to have to take another short break. I wish we didn't have to break because this is really interesting conversation we're having today. But we'll be right back with more Midday in a few minutes. Thank you.
That's hysterical.
Well, we are back with Midday, and we're having a wonderful, wonderful conversation. And you just gave me the beautiful afterthought. This was one of the poems.
Well, that's a poem by my grandmother, and my little publishing company, Saffron Press, started in 1992 in order to do the book, The View on Winter. My grandma was dying. My mother was her caregiver. It was November 1991. I had just started my marketing company a few years earlier. I did a lot of community work, a lot of pro bono work. You know, like most women, I just wanted to make a difference. The money part wasn't too together. And my
we
mother
still
said,
do that.
And my mother says to me, Janny, I want you to do a book of Grandma's poems. And I'm like, Mom, because I haven't had a billable hour in a month, and you want me to do a book of poems? And not only that, but in my brain I'm thinking, Grandma used to write these limericks when we come visit. I said, Mom, we don't want to spend a lot of money publishing that. But she says, no, she gives me this box to read. And over Thanksgiving weekend, I read these poems, and I was like, oh my God, they're beautiful. Eyes out? Uh-huh. Well, my grandmother was a journalist. She was a peace activist, and she'd written a column. But in family life, she was kind of preachy, like was always news articles and stuff. And then the limericks. But in her old age, she was in a group of writers in her community and her friend's house, and she had developed into a beautiful poet. And I knew I had to do it. And plus, I love poetry. I'm a published poet now, but then I was on a different track, and I just had to do it. And that was the beginning of changing from doing things that I felt I needed to do just for money or pride or community work, to doing my heartfelt work, which is really where I am now in my life. And the Southbound Press is what we created to publish that, and that's based on, we had a dog named Southbound, a rescue found on the southbound side of Route 130, and he had died that year. So we named the press Southbound, and
that's
my
wonderful.
husband
So
did
that's
the
your own
logo.
publishing company.
Yeah, that's
wonderful.
the publisher of this book, and May 2018 will be the publisher of the Mother.
And little Southbound has his own legacy too.
Yeah,
I
and
love
then
that.
we have another rescue dog. We love rescuing animals.
Well, that's why we named our
Don't even go there, because
we
this
named
is the
our
queen
horse
of rescue.
we named our horse rescue after our first rescue, which was Little Angel, and it's called Forgotten Angels, and they're not forgotten any
She
longer.
rescues horses like
That's amazing.
it's an amazing it's an amazing project that she has going. But what was your personal evolution besides, you know, becoming your mother's caretaker? What made you decide one day that you wanted to help other women explore their relationships, to get them on, you know, an even ground, or to help them have resolution or resolving their issues? What made you do that?
Well, you know, my journey of caring for and then helping my mother transition to spirit was a really deep one for me. And my coping and spiritual work included becoming a yoga instructor and a deep personal journey. You know, I was raised Quaker, so I have a lot of, and I'm a writer, so I have a lot of appreciation for solitude. But in losing my mother, it was the community of especially women I met in the yoga community that helped me to keep my center. When Mom was first diagnosed and I dropped everything, I think I felt a little destabilized. And when the cancer came back, that's when I went into the deeper study of yoga. Mom had discovered, and I discovered the book The Artist's Way by Julia Cameron. And I did that with a group of women from my yoga practice. I
remember when you were going through that whole process.
And we had the goddess brunches.
Yeah.
That was fun.
Well, we got the goddess brunches.
This woman told me I have to get ready to lose my mother. And I'm like, how do you get ready to lose your mother? But then I started thinking about it and thought, well, so many women I knew had things they needed to process or something they wanted to talk about. And I'd heard on the radio that the highest incidence of heart attacks is Monday morning at 8 o'clock. Now, being self-employed, I tend to work all the time, but I don't work when other people work sometimes. And I thought, you know, if everybody's dying of heart attacks on Monday morning, I think we should just take Monday off. Don't you?
I love it.
I think we should ditch Mondays too.
I created this thing. I said, I called it the Goddess Brunch. I sent out these invitations to all the women I knew, and I said, take the day off and come. I love to cook, so I made this beautiful brunch.
She's a great cook, too.
And I asked everyone to bring something close to their heart or nothing, whatever. I thought women should be able let go. They should have it. They should be off the hook.
Right.
They shouldn't have to cook if they don't want to. They shouldn't have to talk if they don't want to. This is sort of my philosophy.
You're going to have to
Give
do one
space.
now. You're going to have one for daylight savings time because they said so many people have heart attacks right after. I can't believe
I
it.
didn't know
From
that.
just changing
From
what was on
turning
the
it back.
news. Yes.
I have it when you turn it
They
forward.
said
I'm always late.
They
I
said
like it when they turn it
said
back.
that both when
Me
you
too.
turn it back and you turn it forward, they have so many heart attacks. I can't even imagine what that out. I know one thing: the animals don't know. They're all standing there like. It's
time for
my
me to eat.
time.
Yeah,
The horse is-
exactly.
We have
Right.
a donkey.
The cat's
and the
looking at
donkey
me.
is
Right.
screaming out there like, how do they have a clock? I mean, what do they do in the wild? Scream for God to dump the hay down? I mean, it's just crazy.
That's too
But
funny.
yeah, they do. They said, so you're going to have to do a daylight savings time.
Nature nurturing.
Yes, yes.
what it is.
Well, actually, that is, one of the things I say about it. It's not working out. It's working in.
Right.
And when you pay attention to
I
your
love
own,
that saying, not working out, working in.
yeah, when you pay attention to your own inner compass, then things work really well.
So the yoga helps you to decompress and to ground yourself and to look inward. But how do you help other women to do that? Bring them into the yoga. If for our viewers out there, what would you recommend for somebody to decompress? How can we help our viewers decompress?
Well, the essential practice of yoga is attention to the breath.
Attention to the breath.
Attention to the breath. And if you think about it, if you just sit back and you think about how you hold your stomach in.
Mm-hmm.
Well, this is something that as women especially, we all think we should hold our stomach in. We should. Now, your shoulders up, that's good. But clenching your stomach all the time is really unhealthy.
No, I
and
know.
it encourages that shallow breathing that is also a kind of it's a real bad thing for your health.
So I guess
Deep
Spanx aren't
breathing.
any good for you either.
Bangs? Oh, bangs. I thought you said bangs.
I think I'm surprised more women don't have heart attacks trying to get them on.
I can't. But hold that thought because we're going to come right back with more Midday in just a minute.
Oh God.
We're back with Midday. We're having a wonderful conversation, and I wanted to mention again the book. This book is just beautiful. Where can
Now this
people
is
buy it?
Janice's mother's
It's your
book.
mother's, but you are publishing
I'm
it.
the writer, publisher,
Right.
She's the
compiler,
writer, publisher,
And she
compiler.
named the publishing company from her dog, which we
Southbound.
love. We love
Southbound.
animals. Southbound,
Southbound Press.
which is really cute. This book I was looking. This
And
is
her
beautiful.
Janice's book
and your
on the
book.
Well, Janice's book on the mother-daughter way is coming out when?
Mother's Day 2018. I'm in the process of editing it and illustrating. We were talking about the yoga poses
Yes.
and the process. I'm making the book very step by step. It's a 12-week journey, and so
Right.
anybody who picks up the book can do it alone or with other women, or
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Well, you'll have to come on here when that book comes
Yeah,
out.
I'd
today.
love to. I'd love
Back
to
for
come
Mother's
back.
Day would be
Our
perfect.
viewers could get that book, The Mother-Daughter Way,
at Amazon,
which is
Yeah.
really easy. Just go on Amazon and find the
Alistair
mother.
Wilson Light particularly. And I have southboundpress.com also has the note cards in the book and the view
Here's
of
some of them. These
Several-
are beautiful.
Several different offerings available
Beautiful.
on Amazon.
Look at
So
these.
we're really excited that you came and joined
Well,
us
it's so
today.
much fun to talk about Mom.
Yeah, we could talk
Happy
about our
birthday,
mothers
Mom.
forever.
I
so-
learned a lot today too.
Yeah,
Things
well,
that
I have you
I
again.
did want to invite people also to come to my website, JaniceWilsonStridick.com, and read the blog, because these journeys with women, I write about them a lot. And I'm on Facebook. There's an author page for me, and I really love to connect with these stories. It's not just women, but women share so openly, and I just love that.
Oh, thank you so much for joining us
Thanks
and
for
giving
having
your
me.
insight. And we
And-
really appreciate our viewers, and thanks for joining us today. And we'll see you next week, same time on Midday.
And don't forget, you can watch us all the time on demand if you go to our site, and you just on demand has all these shows on for 30 days.
Radio Vision Network TV.
Great.
And we'll be back every week or every day if you go on demand. See you later, and God bless our troops and everyone in this wonderful country.